Open up the door, it's Dave!
Who?
Dave! D-A-V-E!
Dave?
Right, man, Dave.
Dave's not here.
Welcome, foolish mortals, to the Haunted Mansion. Now, the Haunted Mansion's history is rich and interesting, and there's a lot of stories to tell about the Haunted Mansion, so I wanted to take a couple of minutes and talk about that first. And then I want to come back and talk about a second thing. Now, I wanted to take a minute, too, and talk about a couple of the other effects, because, again, Disney came up with some very clever effects for how they make the Haunted Mansion come together, and I wanted to share those with you because they're kind of neat in the way that they work as well.
Of course. And marble busts of the greatest ghost writers the literary world has ever known.
So you may ask yourself, how do they do this? How do they do the moving masks like that? How do the faces follow you? And it's actually a very simple effect. I've taken one of these Halloween type masks, one of these things that's got a little texture to it, so it's got depth. And I put it inside this box, and as you can see, the way I have it facing, the mask is actually facing the back side of the box. So when you're looking at it, you're actually seeing the inside part where you would put it over your face. And as I move across it, you can see that it actually follows you. It's very, very clever, very, very smart, but so simple. You just go around and do it that way. And then what I would do is put a light behind it so that I would actually light it up. This is my very simple contraption that I use at Halloween. I just use an old toy box, and I put a light in there, and that lights it up enough where it makes it so that when you look in there and you're walking past it, the face actually follows you, and it gives it that texture and makes it look like that. But as you can see, it's just the face is facing the other way. So simple, and yet so compelling in a way. This effect is called the Pepper's Ghost effect, and the way it works is you take a three-dimensional object, and I'll use this soccer trophy as my example here. You place it somewhere, and then you put a light on it, and you shine the light on it so that it actually becomes illuminated very well. And then you're going to take a piece of plexiglass, or glass, or whatever you have. It can be acrylic in some way. And you're basically going to position it in a way where the reflection comes in, but you can't see the original object. So in this case, I can put it like this, and as you can see, it's got a ghostly appeal to it because I'm seeing the reflection of the actual object in the glass. So the second thing I wanted to talk about was the omnimover. The omnimover is one of those really cool devices. It's a ride vehicle, it's a ride system that really is cool. It kind of set a new trend in terms of how it works, and it was really well thought out, very well articulated, and it's patented, of course. And the Disney company has used it in several different rides, most prominently in the Haunted Mansion, though you will see it other places. The omnimover is really unique, and I wanted to talk about it for a few minutes because it's really, really cool. Isn't that amazing? It's one of those really cool things when you think about how it works, that it's worth spending a little time talking about. So I wanted to take a few minutes and talk to you about how the omnimover works. And to do this, I went through the patent and I kind of figured out generally how it worked. And then I spent some time with my old Legos. I have some Legos laying around. They've been with me from basically all my life. And I took them out and I started building something that represented the omnimover. More or less this. So this is my basic design for an omnimover. And yeah, it's unsophisticated and it kind of gives you the sense of it, but it doesn't really do the things that a real omnimover does. And why is that? Because the omnimover itself is a fairly sophisticated machined thing that they've come up with. So it has a lot of welded parts, a lot of components to it. But the one thing I can tell you is the design of it is pretty solid. And the concept I'm able to recreate. So it's really kind of cool. I've created sort of a makeshift Lego version of the omnimover. Now I'm only showing 3 cars here. There are obviously many cars. I think it's around 120 that they have attached to each other, and they go around a loop. And so they're all connected to each other and continue around the loop as they go through the entirety of the ride. So the omnimover is really cool because it's just a connected thing. And what you see is something like this, where you'd have a car here that people can enter, and then a car here that people can enter, and then they're on a platform, this moving walkway, where they step onto there. And then, you know, you have another car behind that's continuing to go. So once you see it moving, it looks something like this, where it rolls past the moving walkway. It would be able to get in the car like this, and then the car would continue to move, right? That's kind of how that works. So that part is pretty straightforward, and they're all attached to each other as they're moving along, so it's really simple to understand that way. Now let's talk a little bit more about how it works. And I think that's the more interesting part, is kind of the physics of all this. So if we take away the moving walkway that's up next to it, and then we take away the cover that goes between each of the cars like this, we kind of see down in there a little bit. So what we see is that these are attached to each other. So each one is attached to the next one and so on. And then down at the bottom is the mechanism that actually pulls the entire thing along. So it's got a motorized part to it that's pulling the cars along. It's basically pulling them this way as it goes. And then also there are some very specific things that the car does. Each one of these individual cars has some motion in it. And if we read the patent, it's kind of obvious what it does, though it takes a little while to try to understand how it works. So this is really the critical piece, is kind of how it all moves. What I did was I created an individual car that really lets us see how the motion works within the car. I've separated it out from the other cars just to give you a sense of it, and I put wheels on it just to give you a feel for how it actually comes together. But there are some articulated parts here, like this, where the doom buggy door comes down. This is the door that closes when you get in. So as you're going along, it goes, I will raise the safety bar for you, right? And this is where it gets in, and that's the safety bar. And then there's also the motion. It can articulate this way to turn you toward a show scene, or back, or to the other side so you get to the show scene. And then when you're going backward at some point, you actually wind up tipping back something like this. So you're at an angle like that. So this is part of the whole nature of the way it moves. Now how it moves is really the cool part. It's an unsophisticated design, or really it was when the ride was first built. Since then, they've made a lot of changes to it to make it more flexible and articulated, and there's more things that happen. It's a lot more technical now, and it uses computers and some other things, where in the original incarnation, it actually was just a very simple mechanism that made it work. So basically, what you had was, you'd be riding the car along like this. I'll turn it around here so we can see the other side. You'd be riding along, and there would be a post. So there's basically something like this in the back. And I know I'm oversimplifying this to a large degree, but essentially what would happen is you'd have a post like this that would be sticking up, and you'd have some brackets that would be sticking out. So as the vehicle would approach it, it would bang into this basically, and that would cause it to turn. So if it's coming up this way, it would cause it to turn like click, turn a little bit, click, turn a little more, and the next thing you know, you're facing a different direction. And then you have others along the same path that would make it turn other ways. So if you wanted to turn the other direction, you would put some on the other side that would cause it to turn backward. Really, really, really simple design on that. You know, so basically you're just banging into something, essentially, and then making it turn. So it would be like this. So something would bang into it, and it would turn. Just like that. The same thing goes for the doom buggy door. Something like this, so as it would rub against it, it would actually push it back up. Now, to be fair, this was all hidden from view. I'm putting it in plain view. You would only see from here up. It would actually be below. So it would actually be below this level, but it would do the same thing, where essentially it would just be coming up to it and going, oh, it hit the point where it was closed. Just like that. Now, again, I'm oversimplifying. I'm making it, just making the point here. But this is the ride vehicle, essentially. I've recreated the ride vehicle in a very simple Lego form. You have two people sitting inside of it. They walked on from the platform that would have been here. So they would have walked on from the platform, gotten inside the ride vehicle. They would be on this side because it's facing this way. They would have gotten in the ride vehicle like this and gone on their excursion through the omnimover ride that would be the Haunted Mansion, and they'd be in there. And as it was going along, it would just continue to do this. So every car would have the same features on it with these similar sort of things, where it would actually bang against something and close and open and move and turn and articulate like this. So you could make it do whatever you wanted to do. This was technology, if you want to think about it that way, that the 1950s and 60s offered, that made it very simple to move and articulate and turn and do different things. And again, my wheels, and I've reconfigured them here, would just be there to just show you how it works. it would really be going along this track like this, where it would be riding along the track, and the motion would all be happening because it stays on the track and gets tugged along next to the track. That's how it works. But the articulated motion would happen like this. I couldn't really develop it in the scale that I needed to by doing the piece in the track. I really needed to have the wheels on it to show you how it moved. All make contact with that same exact piece that would make them turn like that. It's just really, really clever the way they did it. And I find the engineering of it to be so simple in the way that they do it. So when you look at the patent, you go, yeah, that seems pretty simple. It's much simpler even than you think it is, because they really just did it like this. Now, I have to admit, when I started building this, I started off with, let's build a dune buggy and let's see what it looks like. And then, I can make it turn. I can make it do this. And it took me many hours to come up with enough sophistication to be able to demonstrate it like this. But I've never seen anybody do this before, where they can actually show you the articulated version of what it looks like, sort of without the track, and give you a sense of how it would work. Now, if I really wanted to spend many more hours, I could actually make it work for many cars, do the whole thing and have it draw along, but I wasn't up for that sort of adventure. It was enough to show how it comes together and how it works. And I thought this was a good way to kind of demonstrate it, so you could see how the whole thing works and kind of how it comes together. So you're probably asking yourself, how does this work exactly? So you have these things on here and they move and they do whatever. And the reality is it's almost like they have a gearing mechanism in the back. So there's these different pieces that stick out almost like a gear. And then you have some different devices around. So if you had something like this that was spinning, right, and it could move around like that. So it would come from something like that, catch in there in the gear, and then cause it to turn because it's the way it's geared. And then it slips off and moves on to the next part. But it causes it to turn. Look, I'm not doing it justice, I know that. I'm not doing it as efficiently as it would work, but that's essentially how it works. It's a gear with a little motor that makes it turn. So it's essentially banging into something or using the momentum of it to make the whole thing turn like this. Every time it runs into one of these things, it makes it turn a little bit, makes it turn. That's all there is to it. It's an unsophisticated piece of technology that really was very simple and very, very interesting in the way that they came up with it. And you got to give them so much credit for being so innovative in a design that at some point they talked about it and they said it was one of the coolest designs they'd ever come up with. Now, while the omnimover is fairly straightforward in its design, there's a lot of sophistication in the way it's machined and the way it's put together. There's some articulated parts, there's some welded parts, there's some refined pieces that go in it with the gearing mechanisms and so forth. So it is kind of technically sophisticated for its time. It was invented in the late 1950s, early 1960s. So for its time, it's really sophisticated. But if you look at it today, it's maybe not as sophisticated. Now they've updated it a lot, the design of the omnimover, to be more sophisticated over time. So now here it is in 2023, and you know that the omnimover has been reinvented to a large degree. It's not the simple design that it once was. But the simple design is really what made it really compelling. And that's what I recreated in the Legos. So you can actually see how it works to a large degree and kind of get a feel for the design of it. I've never seen anybody do this before, where they took the time to kind of recreate it in some way and show it to you. So I thought I'd do that and take a little time and kind of show you how it works. Now, mine is fairly unsophisticated, using Legos that I had when I was a kid and just kind of building something, but it took me many, many hours to try and get it close to right, or something that at least kind of worked to represent what it was. And I kept trying different things until I finally refined the design enough where it made sense. Now, for one more follow-on thing, when Disney started to recreate rides in the 1980s, especially like Spaceship Earth, they decided to reinvent the entirety of a moving vehicle and didn't go with the omnimover. And as I understand it, Bob Gurr had a lot of conversations with them going, you really should be using the omnimover because it's tried and true and we know that it works. And they decided they wanted to build a new ride system that didn't work as well and had a lot of problems over the years and continues to have problems here, 40 years later. But it's really interesting that that came to be true. And you look at, how the omnimover works, the Haunted Mansion, or the Buzz Lightyear Space Ranger spin that used to be if you had wings. Those were really well-designed rides that still run today, 50 years later. So it's pretty remarkable with very little maintenance. I mean, yes, they have to go through a maintenance cycle, of course, but with very little maintenance required on the regular. It's pretty amazing the way that works. So Bob Gurr was right, essentially, that this was a much better ride system. It's so simple in its design and so clever in the way that they came up with it. So that's what I wanted to show you, was just kind of how that worked.
What's your point, David?